Hey everyone, welcome back to Be Not Afraid. I'm Carob Marcelle, and this month I wanted to highlight several really strong fathers who I have had the privilege of interacting with, and I just think that they bring a lot of really good insight in various different ways to the conversation. So, welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you.
Can we start with just a brief introduction of each of you? Go ahead, Adam. I'll just go down
Sure.
the list.
My name is Adam Coleman. I'm a jack of all trades, it feels like these days, but I'm primarily a writer. I'm an author. Occasionally give public speaking a try. I write for a multitude of publications. I'm a columnist for Human Events. Write frequently for the New York Post. Occasionally for the Federalist and a slew of other publications to go down the list there. But yeah, I primarily write, and I also founded Wrong Speak Publishing, where we advocate for people to express themselves and submit articles, and we give them a platform to be heard. Usually it's just regular people who enjoy writing, or regular people who have no experience with writing, but they want the opportunity to tell their story. And we just expanded into news as well. And hopefully later this year we'll be publishing other books besides my own.
That's cool.
Go ahead, Paris.
So I'm a father of 5. I've been married for 20, I better get this right or I'm busted, 27 years, I think. A father of 5. My oldest is 24. My youngest is 10. And I'm a financial professional, have been since 2001. And I do a podcast on preparedness, Prepper Talk Radio, and I have a YouTube channel called Financial Self-Reliance, where I teach people how to manage, protect, and grow their money. And I'm self-employed, I'm a business owner, and really excited to be here and in this platform and panel and meet some of these great men for the first time and to talk to you again for sure. Carob, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
So my name is Aaron. I have 4 kids. Been married for a while. I do I do software development. My wife is more politically active than I am, but I do support her. And I was invited to be here, so here I am. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad you could make it. Trevor?
Yes, so my name is Trevor Lee. I'm an entrepreneur. I am a father of 2 kids and 1 stepdaughter. I've been married for 4 years. And I'm also a state legislator here in the state of Utah.
For coming on. And Carlos.
Hi everyone, my name is Carlos Moreno. I am father of 3 boys, Carlos Isaiah, Carlos Rodrigo, and Carlos Luciano. It's all day at home, it's sparring day. I'm a business owner too, a small business owner. I work in the insurance industry, and it has been really good and wonderful industry to network with many people in different backgrounds.
Awesome, thank you. Guys, I wanted to ask, what does fatherhood mean to you individually?
One of the things that I think about when it comes to fatherhood is that I feel like God gave me these spirits to mentor them on earth, to be good citizens, to grow up, to learn, to develop them. He didn't give me that. I didn't receive these children as, slaves or servants, although I tease them a little bit about, hey, the reason why I had kids is so I could get the yard work done a little easier, or, get the chores done a little easier around the house. But the reality is for me is that fatherhood is I'm a mentor to these miraculous spirits and people that were born to me and my family and to my wife and I. And I've got a stewardship and a great responsibility to help make sure that they grow up and they become productive parts of society and citizens. And I hope that they will be God-fearing as well as part of that, but for sure that they're productive people and productive individuals. That's my role, I feel, as a father, to mentor them into that and help them.
Awesome.
Paris, I think, hit pretty much everything with what he said when it comes to being a father. And I would say that probably every single one of us in here would agree with every bit of that, whether it comes to what we want for our children, that we are given this opportunity to raise and mentor and be there for these kids that we're we have the privilege of being their father of, and I think that you just said it so well.
Thank you.
So the term toxic masculinity, how does that make you feel when you hear that term?
I'll say the term toxic masculinity means very little to me. I think that it's a buzzword that's used for political reasons. But any type of behavior performed by any type of individual can ultimately be toxic. Too much of anything is toxic. Masculinity in itself, I think a healthy amount is extremely positive in our society. It teaches men to, using masculinity amongst men is something that helps protect society. That's extremely beneficial, especially when it comes to protecting women. I think that's vitally important as our role as men, and especially if we have little girls, to protect our daughters and wives and so on and so forth. So toxic masculinity doesn't really mean anything for me because I understand where it stems from. I think it's much of it's media propaganda, and it's done for political purposes. But masculinity in itself, I think it's extremely attractive for women. They like a man who is healthily masculine, and I think it's extremely beneficial for society.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, hi. I was a U.S. Army Airborne Ranger, worked some special ops, kind of gun enthusiast. And when you start talking toxic masculinity, being a college professor, some people try to target me as being a toxic masculinity. But we had a threat to the college I work at from a possible shooter. And sure enough, my text messages and my phone was lit up like a Christmas light because everybody wanted the masculine guy to be sitting at the front door with a shotgun and just in case. So there's definitely a place to be an alpha. There's definitely a place to be masculine. And I think toxic masculinity is it's sort of like systemic racism. It's an overused word to, I think they call it a hasty generalization fallacy. Because not all men are toxic and not all men are masculine, but probably there's 1 or 2% out there that are actually toxic masculinity. It's just many feminist groups want to target all men instead of focusing on the few.
I think it's important for men to be strong because there are men out there that are tyrants and desire to have power over others and want to put them under their thumb and subject them to horrific things. I mean, we just read the news and you see some of the horrific things that are going on in the world. And you can't even look in the last 100 years and see the tyranny that's happened in different countries around the world by different men that I would categorize as tyrants. And those are the toxic things. There's men, though, that need to be powerful enough, strong enough, I like to use the word crazy enough to stand up against those men. That's what puts those men in check, is the other men, the strong men, the men that are willing to fight for freedom and fight for liberty and fight for their women, like Adam talked about, and fight for their daughters and fight for their sons. That's if there was a threat between me, if a threat arrived and it was, I'm going to place myself between that threat and my children. And that's the kind of masculinity that I totally agree with. And I don't want to deny the fact that there are tyrants out there. And that's true. However, I think we've focused way too much on that and not on the good, strong masculinity that needs to be embraced and promoted.
So there's a difference between alpha and toxic. Why do you think it is that men are made to kind of dim themselves down to kind of appear more weak or fragile?
I think it has to do with a lot of the movement in feminism and its desire to change the patriarchy and how it's designed. And it's really quite sad because men have done so much good when we're at our best for this world. And so do women. But to try to change the roles of things that have come so natural, that are natural, have been going on for so long, I believe is doing just what you said, is changing all the good that we can do. And it's something that I hope we can kind of twist and turn back and help men be men, boys be boys. And we're not all the same. We don't think like girls. We're not built like girls. And we need to make sure that we keep that distinguished. And it's okay. It's okay that we're different. It's okay that, you know, we are better at some things than women, and women are a lot better at things than we are at some things. And that's okay.
I agree with what Trevor said.
Brady, do you hear me?
I hear you. I hear you. I was just late to the party.
No worries. Welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Brady. That's about it.
How many kids?
5. My wife came with 3 already. I came with 1, and then we have 1 together. It's definitely been challenging in its own aspects.
Challenging though, but also good and in a way, I think heroic. When we had our interview, I was talking to you about that, and that just the challenges that comes in when you start life immediately. You start your new life as a father immediately. One of the questions I asked all of you guys, and I'd like to get for the audience, is what happened the moment you became a dad?
Is that for all of us or just me?
It's for all of you.
For me, it was kind of like being in shock. I didn't know what to expect. It was new to me. It took a while to grow into the spot of being a dad. You just don't instantly gain feeling like a father. For me, it took time.
Does anyone else want to answer?
This is Biff again, or B. Hey, for me, having a child was one of the greatest things in my life. I mean, I was in the delivery room with my wife, got to bond with the little guy and share some times with mom and son. And then we didn't have our daughter until like 7 years later. But the expectations of being a father were not fulfilled for me in a way. My wife was basically an orphan when we got married. You know, her parents died at an early age. My father left when I was very, very young. You know, so both of us were raised without a dad. And in fact, my wife was raised by her sister because both her mother and her father died. And so we didn't really have any parental examples. And so we sort of stumbled through it at first. But I had sort of a unique circumstance. I was in the military. And so that whole bonding thing with my son and my wife lasted about a week, and then I was on deployment. So, and then I came back in probably about 6 months, and then you restart all over again. And it's sort of crazy for me because, you know, the expectation of being a father was pretty highly pumped up in my head as to one of the greatest things in my life. I still feel that way, but I don't think I was a good dad because I was an awesome soldier. And being an awesome soldier, you know, if there was a war, I raised my hand and I left. And so it was sort of a sad situation because my wife took the burden of raising both kids, my son and my daughter. And I was seldom home. Out of 16 years of marriage that overlapped with my 26 years in the military, I missed more than half the birthdays, more than half the Christmases, and more than half our anniversaries, simply because of military deployments. And, so it was thrilling. It was exciting, but, my wife was basically holding the bag, and I sort of regret that. Not sort of, I definitely regret that. So.
I was going to say for myself, I mostly grew up without my father in my life. He had another family. So the concept of a father was a foreign concept. So when my son was born, really the only thing I knew was that I didn't want to be my father. So, the first thing was just being involved. There was a short period of time where I lived in another state, but I was constantly going back. I would drive from Tennessee to New Jersey at least once a month to go and see my son, until I ultimately moved back to New Jersey, and we've been together since. And we've had a great relationship. I basically treated him much like how I thought I would want my father to treat me. My son is very much so like me, mannerism wise and temperament. And so, I kind of understand him because he's much like me. So I know how to communicate with him, and it's a beautiful level of respect that we have for each other, where I'm like, because he's sensitive, like I was a sensitive kid. So I'm just like, I don't need to do anything crazy. I'm just like, just talk to me. What's going on? And just work with them. So yeah, I think in the very beginning, it was just trying to figure out what is one. I didn't feel like a man because I didn't grow up with a man at that time, and trying to figure out how to be a man while trying to teach my son how to be a man. So, especially throughout my 20s, because I had my son at 21, was trying to figure out both sides and constantly change and develop and get the hang of it over a period of time. So I don't think I was perfect, but I definitely put in the effort. And he, if you ask him, he thinks I'm a great dad. So that's all that matters.
For me, when I had my first child, I just remember when I was single, I had all my focus and certain responsibilities. And I felt that I was, I had a certain level of feeling like had accomplished things. And then I got married and it expanded, it like doubled. And I was like, what is this new, feeling, that I have my wife, and what is this new love, and just I just felt expanded. And I'm like, there's no way I can get bigger than this. There's no way love can expand more than this. And then when that little boy came through, the birthing process, and I held him for the first time, I was like, this is love. This is like, I was in love with my son, and in a way that was more power. It wasn't like, didn't overcome my love for my wife, but it was just expansive. It increased. And I didn't know that was possible. And it happened with each child. And so each child is just, you just don't know how much capacity we have for love until you have something to love that kind of expands the limit of your love. And each child for me was that. That was what I felt when I had each of my children anyways.
Bruce, you haven't introduced yourself, and I haven't asked you these questions yet because I haven't done your father's interview. What was it like the moment that you became a dad?
It's a complicated answer to a complicated story. I'm gonna have to step back a little bit. Give me 1 sec. Okay. Now the boy that is in the next room that I considered to be my own is my wife's son. He's now 16 years old. We've been together for 13 years. Prior to his father dying when he was a little boy, if you roll back the clock an extra 20 years, his mother and I were together when we were both very young. So our lives diverged, and she made a child, and I came back in afterwards to find happiness in my own life and to fill the gap that had been created in hers and in the boys. Now, the boy is a lot like me in many ways, which is not always great news. But he's very bright, and I am very thankful. And with regards to what Paris said about expansive love, I would say that maps over nicely into my world. I was able to stop focusing so intently upon myself and share that level of focus and pour all that energy into building something that was more important than me. For he surely is he's the most important thing in the world. First, we make sure that his mom smiles. That's rule number one, make mom smile every day. And then when we have both accomplished that, I work on him. Now, he's impressed me in a number of ways. He's in his room now. He's taking pre-calculus voluntarily over the summer so that he can go into advanced physics next year. He's an amazing little monkey.
Awesome.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I got here.
That's beautiful. Aaron.
Yes,
All
I'm
right,
here.
Aaron, I know you have a different story.
Yes, my story is a little bit different. My wife and I were married. We're a little bit older. We were married about 5 years. We always wanted kids. Life did start getting a little boring. Like, just living for yourself isn't that great after a while. So we did try to have kids. We weren't able to have our own kids, so we did adopt some children, and it was through the foster care system. So we adopted 2 siblings initially. One was 5, one was about 1.5 years old. And they were pretty severely abused in their previous birth family and then subsequent foster homes. They both have reactive attachment disorder. And yeah, it's been very eye-opening, very interesting. I think my experience has been a lot different than like most of my friends and the experiences you hear with people that have with kids without attachment disorder. And but it's definitely been worth it. There's definitely a feeling of at least for me, a huge feeling of responsibility to do what's best for the kids, and that's not always an easy answer. I will say this though, like when I am focused on the kids, and I don't know how often I get it right or wrong, but when I am focused on trying to do what's best for them, things do seem to work out. They do seem to work out a lot better. And there, yeah, it is interesting. We all have ambitions in life and things we want to accomplish and make a difference in the world. And I think that's part of being masculine too. Like you want to accomplish great things and contribute to society and all this. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I got to temper that a little bit, because I think the most important thing that I can take with me through this life and to the next life is my relationships. And like, I do have a marriage, I have my wife and I have my kids, and those are very unique relationships. And I just feel a tremendous sense of like, I've got to put those first and nurture those. And that's what really matters. And anyway, kind of in a nutshell, that's been sort of how I've approached fatherhood, been a little my journey a little bit. And we did get a couple. So after the first two were adopted, a number of years later, we got a call from the social workers again, like, mom, birth mom had another baby and she can't take care of him. So we adopted a third one. And then a year later, again, we're trying to keep the siblings together, and it's been challenging, but it's been a great journey. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's definitely enriched and blessed my life beyond what I could have imagined. So
what I'm hearing is that there is such sacrifice in the role of fatherhood. Do you feel like society appreciates you? For everyone.
I honestly don't give that a whole lot of thought. Like I got to do what I think. I got to do what is right, and that's kind of the bottom line for me.
Yeah, I kind of feel like one of the male traits that I have is I don't really care that much what other people think. So I don't really care what other people think, and I also don't look for adulation too often, unless it's coming from people I actually care about. So whether society appreciates us, if they don't, then that's their loss. But I don't think a lot of men think about it so much, unless it becomes something where something socially happens that cuts out men. Then that's when we kind of like, we think about like if we're appreciated or not. But for the most part, I don't really think so.
I feel like for our young men especially, there is a narrative of that they are not needed. I noticed when my son was a young man that the girls would wear little shirts, and I mean he is a young man, but when he was a child, the girls would wear shirts that say girl power or girls run the world, or these ideas that the kids don't have any idea. They're just putting on a shirt, right? But as the mother of only a boy, I would watch that and I would just think, what message is that sending to our young men? So
I don't know if we need it, to be honest with you. I think that's much of like it's much of a pickup, where girls are more emotional. They have a higher tendency to feel insecure. And so there's this like social dynamic where we have to create things to remind girls that they're important, that they're special, to give these constant pickups. I'm not even sure if they really need it, but that's kind of what we've accepted. But I don't think we need boy power. I don't think there's any boys that feel like, why am I being left out with the pick-me-ups? I don't think girls are more social than boys are. So it's not the same dynamic. So I understand where you're coming from, but I also don't feel like it's needed. I think it would be something that would be kind of strange. I think we want some sort of recognition when we do something versus just existing. if that makes more sense.
What do you guys think?
I kind of feel like there is a bit of a push in the macro level of society to try to kind of redefine a lot of things. But in the micro level, it doesn't affect me on a day-to-day basis. I don't, wake up in the morning thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to run into today? And so I do, however, have some teenagers, a son that's a teenager, and he has a little bit of that at high school, and he's currently in public school, and there's a little bit of that, but it's not, I don't think it's overt. What kind of, makes me excited is that when he comes home with any concerns, it gives us a chance to talk, and we can communicate, and I can share with him that I'm like, hey, you're a son of God. You're a man who has been born on this earth to become a king. And I can talk to him about some of those things, and we can have those discussions. And so, I do feel like there's, like, I think Adam mentioned earlier, but the propaganda that's out there, that there's definitely some propaganda trying to get men to feel like they're less than. And I don't agree with that at all. And my job is to help my son. And that's where I see it on the micro level, is that as long as I'm focused on what I'm supposed to do, the rest of the world can do whatever the heck it wants. And so I'm trying to focus on what I'm trying to do. And when the world comes into my world, I have to recognize it and say, okay, son, we've got this messaging out there in the world, in these TV shows and these movies and whatever else, in the commercials and whatever else, in what we're seeing in the news. So let's have a conversation about it. And it's kind of cool because that gives me the chance to now really mentor specific to a particular issue. And that kind of, I think opposition in all things. And sometimes when you have an opposition, it makes you stronger.
If you teach at a university or a college, do you see any pressures on the young men?
Yeah, we actually discuss that both in class and out of class. One of the things I do for my students is I've got an open door policy, and they're allowed to come see me about boyfriend, girlfriend, parent problems, job problems. So I'm sort of a sounding board, a little bit of a counselor, as well as their professor in business kind of topic. A book that was published a few years ago, and it was called the War Again, that we have to raise boys the way we raise girls. We got to change boys' gender schemas. We have to make boys play with dolls. We have to keep boys away from competitive activities. And we got to reward boys for being more sensitive and talking about their feelings. And I think there is a certain group of young men that has happened. I mean, I talk to parents as well, where boys were raised to play with dolls, and boys were kept away from competitive activities, and they were rewarded for being more sensitive. And believe it or not, I mean, they oftentimes wash out because you have to have a little bit of a backbone to get through 4 years of college. I mean, many of my students are inner city students, and many of them work 8 hours a day, followed by 8 hours of school. I've got one in particular tells me works from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, takes a quick nap, and then starts school at 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then goes to sleep before the 10 o'clock shift. And you do that for 4 years. I mean, that shows some level of strength. So my point is, there are some children, whether male or female, that are susceptible to being manipulated like that. And I have met some parents that are actually doing that type of manipulation, which to me is fairly sad. I am encouraged by the younger generation, though. I finished the military after 26 years. I used GI Bill nonetheless, I used the GI Bill to get my doctorate, with the motivation of trying to fix some things that were in higher education. Been instructor of the year several years in a row for an inner city college, which is pretty great. You're graded by the students. But the most worthwhile thing to me is talking to the students one-on-one and giving them the opportunity of truly expressing themselves. And some young men come in the room and they're stoic. Some young women are stoic. Some young men come in and they shed tears right there in my office. Same thing with women. The way I did my children, my son and my daughter are about 6 years apart. I taught them exactly the same things. And what I found is they just reacted differently to it. So both kids received Taekwondo training the moment they were able to walk. And that went all the way up until their teens. Taught them both how to use rifle at age 13, taught them both how to use pistols at age 18. But the things I trained them on were received different by each child. And you know, we availed to them toy guns, dart guns we used to call them, or cap guns we used to call them. Well, the boy played with those more than the girl. We availed to both of them dollies, but he didn't have a preference for dolls. So I think it's an innate part of every man and woman at that childhood stage that we've got some stuff really truly wired right there within our DNA, dictates, you know, the direction that we go, regardless of the opportunities that we're given.
That is an eye-opening thing, because I'm just going from being a very girly girl and I'm watching this, and I totally would have thought that yes, it would affect boys the same way. And so I think, I told my husband once, he works a lot, and I told him, you have to stop working. When my son turned 12, I said, you can't work nearly as much, because I can teach my son how to be a good person, but I can't teach him how to be a good man.
Right.
The importance of a male in the home is, I think it's vital. And there's lots of people who grow up with no father. I think that adds to a lot of problems in society. So I wonder why it is that we push more towards it. We really are at a place where we're saying it's perfectly fine for women to be single. On that note, what do you think the ideal father figure is like?
I think an ideal father provides, protects, and teaches. And you could say the teaching part would even come into mentoring for their children as well. And I think that's an ideal father, is having those three qualities, and is the role essentially. And it can be done in a wide variety of different ways, right? Every dad is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. And I think that if you can essentially incorporate those three things, or you have those, then you're going to be a good role for a dad.
Adam, you're leaning in. Do you have something else to say?
Yeah, I in my book, I describe a father as being the purpose compass. They're supposed to help to guide their children towards their purpose in life. And especially in relation to their sons. Men are much more purpose-oriented. We're doers, and we want to know how we're useful in society. And sometimes you have to have someone to help guide them towards finding some sort of position or direction that they will feel useful. And so when you see a lot of people who are self-destructive, they're self-destructive because they have no purpose. You know, what else are they going to do? That's why they say, you know, if you're talking about kids who end up joining gangs, well, they have no other purpose because there's nothing else going on. They have no structure. What's the purpose of me being here? I suck at school. You know, I'm just running the streets. My family doesn't care. And so they're just trying to find some purpose, even if it means, you know, being somewhat homicidal and suicidal, just to have some sort of purpose. So I think that being the purpose compass, being the guide for your child, so when they do enter adulthood, they're not lost. I think that's extremely important. And my son is 17, he'll be 18 in October. And for the past number of years, all I've done is talk to him about what it's like on the other side once you become an adult and no one cares about you. I mean, that's the harsh reality. Once you become an adult, you're responsible for your outcome, your life, right? You get in trouble, you go to jail. No one cares. And that is the honest part about being a father, is that you have to tell them the truth. You can't lie to them. And when you lie to them, that's when they're unprepared. So we have to be age appropriately honest with our children, prepare them for the world, because the world can occasionally be harsh, but that's how you build their strength. You prepare them, you slowly walk them into it. So I think that's something that's extremely, extremely important. That's something that I didn't get. And my son is much farther along than I was in preparation to be an adult. So that is something that I feel like is extremely vital. So, and the last thing I'll say is, you know, having my son when he was little, you know, they're cute and everything, but I couldn't wait till he became a teenager. And usually people say the other way around, but I felt like by that point, I went through so many things that I had to learn the hard way that I couldn't wait to kind of give him the tips, prepare him, show him what to do. And that's how he turned out in his teens is exactly how I wanted it to go. When he had his first girl issue, we were able to talk about it. He got his first job about a year ago. Prepare him for it, dealing with the general public and things like that. So preparing them for the real world is important.
So, you guys, what do you believe is the biggest problem facing especially our boys?
Carrie, I think it is definitely the absence of fathers in the home. I mean, that's very evident by any type of study statistic, any city that's got high crime, any area of the world that's not thriving. It's an absence of fathers in the home who are teaching their kids. And I feel like one of the issues with that, and we kind of talked about this, is the education system is what's raising our children now. Any of these kids, let's say if you're in a city and you don't have any fatherhood in your life, any fatherhood figure anywhere, not even just a city, but you go to a public school and you're being taught there everything that you're supposed to be learning, that a lot of it should be coming from your father, and you're just being taught everything in the public education system. And I don't think that is the right way to go, especially because how are they going to teach you how to survive? How are they going to teach you how to protect? How are they going to teach you so many things that a father needs to be doing and to be there for you and have that role? And so we've just kind of in society pushed it off onto other people to fill in those gaps.
I also feel that there's just along those same lines that what Trevor was talking about is the lack of responsibility. One of the other things too is this an entitlement mentality of like, everybody's just going to do it for me, and I'm not going to have any do it. I don't have any work ethic myself. And one of the things that I think is facing when I grew up, my dad basically said, look, hey, the sink is broken, go fix it. And I'm like, well, how? And he's like, just go in there and start working on it until it's fixed. And I'm like, so, whoa. And so when you try to, talk to my sons about helping out in the yard or whatever, they're like, well, Dad, we're on our phones, or, you know what I mean? There's just this interesting, generational gap that's kind of come up, and something that I'm just, reminded of that may not be directly to this particular question, but in general, one of the things I've heard over a long time ago was that if you teach people correct principles and let them govern themselves, then you can really create a society where things can work better. And then I think on top of that is to then present an example of how to live those correct principles. And I just was watching a show on social media, and a man got on there and says, one of the greatest things that I learned as I was talking to my children about what they could do to kind of, what do they get the most from me was, or what do they get the most out of development towards becoming, positive growth in citizens of society, was that when they saw their father work on himself, like personal progress, personal development was a huge thing. And then, of course, I personally believe that one of the greatest things that I can provide as a gift to my children is to show them how much I love their mom. And that's one of my biggest things that a lot of kids, they don't get to see their dad loving their mom. They don't get to see their dad serving other people. They don't get to have those examples of like they can watch a movie or something and see, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, I'm supposed to do this, but they don't have a direct example of how to apply it in their life from somebody they can actually look to as a mentor or as a father figure to then help them apply it. Like, I know some of the principles are out there, you can learn them, but then how do you apply it? Like, what's the example of how this works and how this applies in this particular situation? And that's what I think a good father, an ideal father would be able to provide that example, teach those principles. I like I say a funny thing. It says, I like to teach my kids principles, and sometimes I use words. I think that's really kind of the idea, is that example of a good, strong man is what a lot of our kids are kind of not. So for example, I have a lot of my children bring their friends over, and my daughter, I'm mentoring, my daughter brought over her boyfriend and her best friend, and they didn't have good father figures in their life growing up. And they told my daughter, my daughter came back and says, your dad is so cool. He is there, and he's teaching, and he's willing, and he's open. He's right. And so I was like, that's sad to me because it's not out there. But I was, of course I felt good that they had that praise for a little bit, but you got to be careful with that too, because you don't want to let it go to your head too much. But it's sad to me that it's not out there like it should be.
Can I add something to that? Because Paris, that was great. And I think one of the other issues we're seeing nowadays, even if you are a father, is not being married. And that's a serious problem, because it shows a lack of commitment. And we see that a lot nowadays as well. And I don't think it creates that good example when you have so many people who are cohabitating, but they're not married.
I agree with everything Paris and Trevor have said. In fact, I probably would say the same things. On top of what they have said is I also, what's facing a lot of our kids, I believe, is the societal like pressure to gender swap and swap roles and blend the roles together, like wanting men to be women and women to be men, and at the same time also the parents aren't involved like they used to be. So a lot of these kids are left to parent themselves, and the only thing that's teaching them, quite honestly, is the education system, and it's teaching them to swap roles. And no wonder why a lot of them are so confused and not knowing where they fit in and not knowing what to do, or like previous mentioned, no purpose. And that is very difficult on our children, and we're inevitably screwing up an entire generation, and we just haven't realized it yet, in my opinion. I don't know how it can be saved unless there's another societal shift.
And that's my kind of final question. What do you believe, gentlemen? What can we do? What actions can we take as fathers or role models to change the direction? One thing I really want to praise you all for is that, from my perspective, it seems like there's so many moms standing up, going to PTA meetings and fighting and getting, the hate. And many times I've sat and been like, where are the fathers? Where are the dads in this? Because when we were little, they used to have a thing that would say, over my dead body. You will harm my child over my dead body. And now today it's, oh gosh, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to cause any kind of trouble. We don't want somebody to say something bad about us. I wanted to highlight people who are saying, yeah, you don't get to do this to my kids. But what can men do specifically to change directions of what's happening?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Carlos. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This conversation has been great. Just my father passed 5 months ago. I mean, I'm missing a lot. I spent a lot of time with my dad since I was a child. He was a politician in my country, in Venezuela. He was a politician, and I remember him walking with him in the street, because politics over there is very, very different. And I remember since I was 5 years old, I start remembering things. Going to my dad, knocking doors, organizing people. That kind of work that he did with me, bringing me to my field, to his work, to what he's doing, getting involved with him, build my character. And I saw my dad's character in also decisions. For example, in my country, we have we have a lot of corruption. Now it's crazy. We are a socialist country or communist country. But I saw my dad taking. One day I remember that my dad told me. He told me something like, the people. He said, like, in politics and life, he told me, people will respect when you say the truth. When you give your word to anyone, you need to keep your word until the end. And that gives him a lot of respect for many people in Venezuela. Bad politician and good politician respect him because he gives his word, and he was a person with he was a very good person in that society. That's what I'm doing right now with my kids. With my older one, Carlos Isaiah. Carlos go with me to any event, and I educate him about what happening in Venezuela and what's happening here right now. In my opinion, we need to take more time with our kids. and let them know what happening and what happening in the country. For example, if we talk about politics, if we talk about family, um, I remember one day I was like 7 years old, and the house, we need to clean the house. I told my dad, because in Latin America you have a very machista society. I don't know if you know that term.
Machismo, yes.
Yeah, just the woman go to the home, they clean everything, they cook. And my dad was different. My dad was, oh, because my mother was cleaning the house, and it's okay, it's time to do. We need to help your mother. And I said like, no, that's for women. My goodness, what I say that I was 7 years old, and he in that moment he said like, no, you are wrong. Men have the duty to clean the house, cook, and do everything. I'm better than your mother. And we start cleaning all the home. We start like in the morning and we finish in the afternoon. And I remember that example. I remember that teaching that he gave me. My wife don't have to be multitask with me because I put my effort with her to clean the home, to clean the bathroom, whatever I need to do in the home. I'm here for you. And that's why my all my intervention is like what we need to do is bringing our kids with us, and they need to see how we react. They need to see what we do in our daily work.
No, I think that's valid. I think that we need the most is connection. We need to disconnect from so much of, we're constantly distracted. There's things in our faces all the time. And if we just have connection, I feel like the biggest problems with mental health, the biggest problems with drugs and alcohol and despondency is that people don't feel connected, or they don't feel that they matter. And I think that it's a very special gift that fathers have, to put their arms around their children, and especially their boys, and to say, hey, no, I get it, and I'm here for you. And there's nothing in the world that matters more than your child. So,
one day I realized, when I started growing up and becoming more mature in my life, I realized that my dad became my best friend.
Carlos, I'm really glad you mentioned that you're from Venezuela. But Venezuela went through this very, very rapid change in politics. They basically went from the #1 economy in all of Latin America to number 187 out of 188 countries in a period of less than 10 years. And it was simply that Venezuela was very strong with husbands and wives and what we call the nuclear family. Very, very defined roles for Venezuelan women, very defined roles for Venezuelan men. And then basically what happened was Hugo Chavez became president and started shifting the entire country from capitalism to socialism. And in so doing, many of the Venezuelan women, the number of unwed mothers increased, and the level of dependency on the government instead of on the husband increased. And what we saw in Venezuela actually occurred in a period of just 10 to 12 years, basically from about 2000 to 2012 was the most rapid decline, both in their economy and in the damage to Venezuelan families. My hypothesis, too, based on what we were discussing, is that to a large extent, the father is not in the home here in the United States, and it started back in 1935 with the invention of Social Security. So Social Security intervened into families. Prior to Social Security, grandparents were taken care of by the parents, and the parents were actually taking care of the older generation, the younger generation. And then the parents got old, and guess what? Their kids took care of them, and their kids took care of their grandkids. And that's how family units worked throughout the entire world until introduction of Social Security. Once Social Security came in, there was less dependence by older people and a divorce between grandparents and the grandchildren. Eventually, Social Security mutated and turned into we could call it a handout program under Lyndon Baines Johnson, where there was incentivized unwed mothers. So the Black community went from 20% out of wedlock births to today, it is 69% of all Black children are born out of wedlock. 52% of all Hispanic children, 30% of all white children, 17% of all Asian children born in the United States are born to a single mom. And that is the number one thing I think, we were talking previously about, what's the man's role? What's the father's role? And we were asking about, what has changed? Why are kids becoming more wimpy? Well, you can point directly to the fact that those statistics I just mentioned, where you have single parent homes and no man involved in their life, that's huge. It's absolutely huge, and has physically transformed the familial landscape of the United States. In a period of 3 generations, they have literally destroyed the nuclear family in this country. And that lays at the feet of both the politicians and the people who are basically pumping out children without a little ring on their finger.
I was just going to say, B, thank you for that, because that proves the point of what we really need to be doing as men. We need to become aware of what's going on. We need to be aware of these toxic masculinities that are tyrants that are trying to create things like what happened in Venezuela. And we need to fight against that. We need to stand up and say, no, enough is enough. When the horde of darkness comes, we need to stand as warriors of light. And we need to be the ones that are going to say, no, it stops here. What is the old saying? Not today, Satan, or whoever, however you want to. I'm just saying that awareness brings change. And if we have our head in the sands as men, then we're going to get run right over. And we have to be aware, like what B and what Carlos, the manliness is awareness. It's also, there's so many things. And the fact that, first of all, Carob, thank you so much for putting on this panel for us to have a voice. Because this is part of the solution. This is part of the solution, giving the men who know what to do a voice so that other men watch and say, you know what, if that guy's doing it, I can do it too. And hopefully this gets watched by hundreds of thousands of people. And they all say, you know what, let's do it. Let's make the change. Let's be the change. Awareness brings change. And I think that we need to be more aware of what's going on so that we can make sure that the good changes are happening in the right direction. That's what I want to say.
Bruce, did you have something? It looked like your mic was on.
I just wanted to say God bless to Carlos on the loss of your father. It looks like he created a good young man, and you're going to do the same.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of the conversation and for pushing back against the narrative and for giving me an example to show, because it is really just the narratives that are out there are poisonous and toxic. And I love the idea that there are men who have all different experiences and have still stepped up to the plate, even if it came later in life. Even if you weren't able to be there and you have regrets from earlier, none of us are perfect. So the fact that you've gotten, and anybody who wants to see the rest of these stories, this will come up, and then they will come up the week following. B's story ends wonderfully. He has a wonderful relationship with his children today. And many of us are in the process still of raising those kids, but I really appreciate it. And as somebody who did not grow up with a father, I'm so proud that there are men that are stepping up to the plate. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Carrie.
See you.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye.